Trade Union Federation, Cosatu, has rejected the unbundling of Transnet. President Cyril Ramaphosa announced the National Ports Authority would become an independent subsidiary of Transnet. Cosatu says the decision is suspicious as it's not in line with the vision of the alliance and the party's manifesto. The spokesperson of Cosatu is Sizwe Pamla, and he joins me now for a further discussion on this. Sizwe, thank you so much for making time on the lead this afternoon. So why are you rejecting the unbundling of Transnet? What consequences do you foresee for workers?
Well, firstly, we were not consulted when it comes to this decision, and that is a big problem when you consider the consequences. If you look at the Ports Authority, it is likely to be declared as an essential service. If it is declared as an essential service, it means that it will hugely impact on the workers' right to strikes, which means whatever decision that ends up being taken, workers have to be part of that discussion because it will affect them. But as we have seen before, when it comes to these kinds of decisions, there are also retrenchments that go with these kinds of restructuring. So the president did say that he guarantees us that there will be no job losses. We don't trust him anymore. That is what he told us when we were talking about SAPC. So we want to be part of the discussions, and we want to hear what is the rationale for this unbundling. Because if you look closely, this isn't going to solve the issue of the huge bloated structure that we've been talking about, Transnet. It isn't going to address the issues of corruption that have been highlighted in various platforms. It is also not going to really improve anything, the unbundling, except that it is going to just fragment further the SOEs that we are trying to manage.
Well, that's not really what the president and even Transnet has said, because they've argued that this is going to boost the functioning of the country's ports, which have been hampered by inefficiencies and aging infrastructure. We can't afford, I'm sure you'll agree, for this to continue. And I don't know if you've seen a report released by the World Bank. It ranked SA ports among the worst performers in the world. And this is a critical part of the economy that we can capitalize in, given how strategic it is placed on the continent, and it can play a role in job creation.
We actually agree. We actually agree with the vision. We also have been saying that our ports, we need, when it comes to infrastructure rollout, we need a huge chunk of that money to be invested in our ports. So we agree with that and we support that. What we don't understand is the reason why is it that this needs the kind of unbundling that is being currently proposed. Because if you remember, we were told that we have got more than 700 of these state entities. And the idea was that this is not sustainable. Now, if you say that you have got many of these entities and you are trying to cut down and reduce them, to then come out and say that at ESCOM you are proposing unbundling. If you look at the new agency, the border management agency that has been proposed, if you go back to the budget, the State of the Nation address, the president introduced new agencies. There's a water agency and the land and agrarian agency. So what we are suspecting here is, why is it that there is this push for unbundling of these institutions if the rationale is to reduce the number? Why is it that all of the decisions that are taken on a daily basis actually do the opposite of what was previously proposed? Because the idea here was that we need to ensure that these SOEs are able to perform on their, to deliver on their mandate, not to unbundle them and fragment them in a manner that the government is doing.
So what do you think is at play here? You've just indicated now that you don't trust the president anymore. This is the man that you backed as Cosatu to be president, but you've been questioning his moves, right? His economic reforms. What's the issue? Is it about, as you said earlier, the lack of consultation, or is his administration deviating from ANC policy? Is he deviating from the manifesto of the ANC and even the vision of the alliance?
Yes, his administration is actually deviating from the ANC manifesto of 2019. Because the ANC manifesto of 2019 talked about putting together a developmental state that is going to intervene in the economy. Yet his administration is imposing austerity measures that have reduced the number of departments. and it is imposing austerity measures that is cutting down resources that are supposed to be allocated to either SOEs or state institutions. So that on its own has made us to look at this differently. And if you look at what has happened with the SOEs, they've been leading the charge when it comes to retrenchment. You look at the 600 workers who lost their jobs at SAPC. Yeah. We were given assurances by the ANC caucus in Parliament, by Luthuli House, by the minister, that jobs were not going to be lost, that everything was going to be done to protect jobs at SAPC. Yet now we've got more than 600 workers who are seated at home. If you look at South African Airways, we sat around the table for a long time debating and discussing how to resuscitate South African Airways. We agreed that government was going to keep the majority stake. Yeah. And a week or so ago, we were ambushed with a decision that now South African Airways has been privatized. We have every reason to be suspicious of this administration because it has done everything to actually undercut workers.
Yeah, why are you still supporting him then, Sizwe? Because from what I'm getting from you, you have been betrayed by this man that you helped ascend to the powerful position of ANC president and then later president of the country. Where do you think he's getting his mandate from then? If, from your suggestion, he seems to be deviating from what is the vision of the alliance and even the policy of the ANC.
Well, which is why we are calling for a moratorium, because we also want to meet firstly with the ANC to talk about these latest developments with regards to the future of the SOEs. But we also want to meet with him to talk about this, because if you remember in June 2020, he appointed an SOE council. And in that SOE council, we were told that this council was actually going to come out with some kind of a vision or a report that was going to be tabled at NETLAC for everyone to be able to engage on that report. A year later, we haven't received any report from this SOE council. And yet, now we are dealing with a third SOE, where a decision is being taken unilaterally without consulting workers. So we want to have discussions with him as the president of the country, but we also want to talk to the ANC about these latest developments, because if you look at the privatization of South African Airways, that issue actually is something that caught us by surprise, because in our engagements and discussions, we understood that at least government was going to keep the majority stake. So what we are saying here is that we support the reforms, but these kinds of reforms, we need to be engaged. They have to be transparent, because we are where we are because of the unilateral decisions that have been taken before. Yeah. So we are not going to allow going forward that this administration continues to take decisions without consulting the people who are going to be affected by those decisions.
So what are you going to do then if they continue this way? So I hear you that you'll be expressing your concerns when you meet with the president, when you meet with the ANC. But do you think the ANC takes you seriously, Sizwe, or even your inputs as alliance partners? How many times have you complained that the ANC doesn't take your input seriously, or that it doesn't even consult with you, or that it simply doesn't even listen to your suggestions? Why are you still in this alliance if your position as alliance partners is not respected?
Well, look, there are a lot of issues where we agree, and there are a lot of issues where we disagree with the ANC. So on this particular issue that we're talking about, we disagree with this administration, which is why we want to talk to them. We agree with them that there's a need to reform and restructure these SOEs. We agree that these SOEs are a burden on South Africans, and they need to be assets and tools that are being used by government to intervene on behalf of the people. Yeah. So we are on the same wavelength when it comes to the principles. What we don't want is the unilateralism that we are seeing, where decisions get taken without stakeholders being properly consulted.
This has been going on for some time, Sizwe. That's why I'm asking, how long are you going to be complaining for? I've interviewed you many times over the last, I think even 4 years ago. You've still complained about the same thing. You complain about e-tolls. You have not been listened to. You complain about Treasury and how it pushes neoliberal agendas. How many finance ministers have you actually called for to step aside because you just felt the agenda that they are pushing at Treasury is anti-worker? So what I'm asking is, for how long am I going to have these conversations with you where you're constantly complaining about the ANC and you have meetings with the president and the organization itself, but nothing changes?
Well, it's a little bit of an exaggeration on your part to say nothing changes. Of course, there's a lot that changes.
How long have you been complaining about e-tolls? Has anything changed on that front? Treasury? Has anything changed at Treasury? The approach by the finance ministers?
Well, actually, when it comes to the e-tolls, that's the biggest and the most successful consumer boycott by South Africans led by Labour of post-1994.
But there's still gantries. There's still gantries.
We have won the victory of e-tolls. The issue wasn't really necessarily about the gantries. The issue was about paying. So people are not paying. So this consumer boycott has been very successful. So we have won that victory. The discussion now is to how to remove the countries and when to remove them. So we have moved on from that battle because as Labour working with progressive civil society and people of South Africa, we've been able to wage a successful consumer boycott. So the point here is that, look, we understand that this state is going to be contested. We understand that the private sector is also whispering in the ears of this administration because they want their own policies to be the ones that get prioritized. So we don't shy away from actually contesting the direction of the state. You are right. There are a number of issues where we totally disagree with this administration, but we are not a single issue alliance, which means our relationship is not based on one single issue. There are a number of issues where we have disagreed. In some instances, we have found each other. There are a number of issues where we still disagree, and we are yet to find a common ground. So that is the nature of the alliance. It is not a single issue alliance, but there are a number of issues also where we are on the same page with the alliance. And it will be a little bit unfair. And you'll be overstating it on your part if you were to say for the last 4 years, nothing has actually moved on the side of the workers. There's a lot that we can talk about where workers have benefited from being part of this alliance. But on this particular issue, we agree in principle that there has to be a restructuring of the SOEs. We just don't want the lack of transparency, and we want us to be part of the discussions, meaning Labour. We want to be part of the discussions to discuss the future of these SOEs.
All right. Sizwe Pamla, Cosatu spokesperson, thank you so much for your time. And that's where I leave it for today. Sally Bedet will have your headlines at the top of the hour on South Africa Tonight.